Step away from that bar before you embarrass yourself.
Vanessa Hallberg snatched Malcolm's bourbon off the counter.
You buy one expensive drink and suddenly think you belong here?
Malcolm didn't move.
Are you deaf?
She shoved his papers aside.
Look at you sitting there like some big shot.
The bar went quiet. Phones lifted. Malcolm's voice stayed calm.
Put the glass down.
Vanessa laughed in his face.
Or what? You'll call your imaginary lawyer?
Elena froze behind the counter. Vanessa raised the glass higher.
People with real money don't need to pretend.
Then she poured the bourbon over Malcolm's head. Whiskey ran down his face and soaked his shirt. Vanessa smirked and pointed toward the door.
There, security can drag you out before you embarrass yourself any further.
Malcolm didn't flinch. Vanessa had no idea. The quiet man she humiliated had just pulled $100 million from her company. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The Iron Lantern Bar buzzed with the energy of Chicago's elite on a Friday evening. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished mahogany tables, where men in $1,000 suits discussed mergers over aged whiskey. Women draped in designer dresses laughed at jokes that weren't funny, their jewelry catching the light like tiny stars. Malcolm Reed stepped through the entrance, his movements deliberate and calm. He wore a simple dark polo shirt and well-fitted jeans, expensive but understated. His presence was quiet, controlled. The kind of man who observed before speaking. Behind the gleaming bar, Elena Torres worked with practiced efficiency. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her white shirt crisp despite the busy night. She moved between customers with sharp attention, mixing drinks and managing the chaos of downtown Chicago's power players. Malcolm approached the bar and selected a seat near the impressive whiskey display. Bottles worth more than most people's monthly salary lined the shelves behind Elena. He set his phone on the polished wood surface and opened a thick folder of financial documents. "What can I get you?" Elena asked, her voice professional but warm. "Macallan 25. Neat," Malcolm said, without looking up from his papers. Elena poured the amber liquid into a heavy crystal glass. The whiskey cost $200. Malcolm placed cash on the bar without counting it. The front doors burst open with a rush of cold October air. Vanessa Hallberg swept in with 3 friends, their laughter carrying across the crowded room. She wore a flowing emerald gown that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Diamond earrings sparkled against her blonde hair. "God, I'm so done with charity events," Vanessa announced loudly. "All those boring speeches about helping people. Like, we already gave them money. What more do they want?" Her friends giggled appropriately. They found an empty section near Malcolm's end of the bar, claiming the space like they owned it. Which, technically, they did. This was a Hallberg hotel. Vanessa's eyes swept the room, hungry for attention. Her gaze landed on Malcolm, still focused on his documents. She tilted her head, studying his casual clothes with obvious disapproval. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I think you're in the wrong place." Malcolm didn't look up from his papers. Vanessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a cruel smile. "This isn't exactly a sports bar, honey. The Applebee's down the street might be more your speed." A few customers turned to watch. Elena's jaw tightened as she dried glasses with unnecessary force. Malcolm calmly turned a page in his folder. "Are you seriously going to ignore me?" Vanessa's voice rose higher. "Do you have any idea who I am? This is my family's hotel." One of her friends touched her arm. "Vanessa, maybe just—" "No." Vanessa shook her off. "I'm sick of people like this thinking they can just waltz in here and pretend they belong. Look at him. He's probably here trying to impress some gold digger with Daddy's credit card." The bar grew quieter. Even the loud businessmen at corner tables glanced over. Malcolm finally looked up. His dark eyes met Vanessa's with perfect calm. He said nothing. "What's the matter?" Vanessa stepped closer, emboldened by the growing audience. "Cat got your tongue? Or did you finally realize you don't have enough money to actually be here?" Elena leaned across the bar. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "Don't!" Vanessa snapped. "This is exactly the problem. People like him think they can buy one overpriced drink and suddenly they're part of our world." She reached for Malcolm's crystal glass, her movements sharp with entitlement. Malcolm's hand moved toward the glass, but Vanessa was faster. She grabbed the heavy tumbler filled with $200 whiskey. The room held its breath. Without hesitation, Vanessa tilted the glass and poured the amber liquid slowly over Malcolm's head. The whiskey ran down his face, soaking his dark hair and staining his polo shirt. Droplets splashed onto his financial documents. The alcohol's sharp scent filled the air. Gasps echoed through the bar. Phone cameras emerged like weapons, recording every second. "There," Vanessa said with satisfaction. "Now, maybe security can take out the trash where it belongs." Two security guards in black suits approached Malcolm's seat, their faces uncomfortable but determined. Malcolm stood slowly, whiskey still dripping from his chin. He pulled a cloth napkin from the bar and wiped his face with methodical precision. His movements remained perfectly controlled, almost ceremonial. The room waited. Malcolm looked directly at Vanessa, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent bar. "Interesting timing," he said. "I just pulled my $100 million position from your company 10 minutes ago." The silence stretched like a held breath. Vanessa's triumphant smile flickered. "What?" A businessman at a nearby table suddenly straightened. "Wait a minute. Are you Malcolm Reed?" Another voice from across the room. "Reed Capital Malcolm Reed." The whispered recognition spread like wildfire. Faces turned pale. The security guards stopped moving. Vanessa's face went white as the implications crashed over her. Malcolm stepped into the cold Chicago rain, his bourbon-soaked shirt clinging to his shoulders. The city's neon lights reflected off wet pavement as he walked toward the hotel's main entrance, leaving behind the chaos inside the Iron Lantern bar. Behind him, Elena's voice cut through the lobby noise as she confronted the security guards. "You stood there and watched her humiliate that man," Elena said, her face flushed with anger. "You were ready to throw him out for absolutely nothing." The taller guard shrugged. "Ms. Hallberg is family. We follow orders." "That's disgusting," Elena shot back. "You know what she did was wrong." "Look, lady," the second guard interrupted. "We don't get paid to judge the boss's daughter. We get paid to keep the peace." Elena's hands trembled with frustration. That wasn't keeping the peace. That was enabling a spoiled brat who thinks money makes her untouchable. Inside the bar, Vanessa paced frantically between tables, her designer heels clicking against marble floors. Her friends had gone silent, staring at their phones as the implications sank in. "This can't be happening," Vanessa muttered. He was nobody. He looked like nobody. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard Hallberg's name appeared on the screen. She answered with shaking hands. "Daddy? What did you do?" Richard's voice exploded through the speaker. "I'm getting calls from hotel managers saying you attacked Malcolm Reed in our bar." "I didn't attack anyone," Vanessa protested. You poured alcohol on one of our biggest investors?" Richard's voice rose to a roar. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this company?" Vanessa's stomach dropped. How was I supposed to know? He looked ordinary. Ordinary. Richard's breathing grew heavy. That ordinary man controls more money than most small countries. And you humiliated him in public? Across town in his hotel suite, Malcolm peeled off his whiskey-stained shirt and reached for his phone. Jordan Pike answered on the first ring despite the late hour. "Malcolm? How did the meeting go?" "There was no meeting," Malcolm said calmly. "We need to accelerate the withdrawal announcement. Tonight." Jordan's voice sharpened. "What happened?" Malcolm explained the bar incident while toweling off his hair. Jordan listened in growing disbelief. "She actually poured liquor on you?" Jordan asked. "In front of witnesses?" "Multiple cameras recorded it," Malcolm confirmed. "This family's true character is now public record." "Good," Jordan said with quiet satisfaction. "I'll draft the press release immediately. We'll have it ready before Asian markets open." Meanwhile, Elena had retreated to the bar's back office, her shift finally ending. She couldn't stop replaying the evening's events. Malcolm's composed dignity under humiliation reminded her of her own father, who had endured similar treatment from wealthy customers during his years as a hotel janitor. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Malcolm Reed. I wanted to thank you for standing up earlier. If you ever need anything, please reach out." Elena stared at the message, then typed back, "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry about tonight. That behavior isn't uncommon here. Executives treat people terribly, and nobody ever speaks up. I've seen things that would shock you." Elsewhere in the city, a customer named David Martinez sat in his apartment uploading phone footage to social media. He captioned the video, "Rich woman pours drink on quiet man at upscale bar. His response will blow your mind." The video began spreading immediately. Within an hour, comments flooded in expressing outrage at Vanessa's cruelty and admiration for Malcolm's composure. The footage showed everything: Vanessa's mocking laughter, Malcolm's calm response, and the moment recognition dawned on nearby businessmen. Former Hallberg employees began emerging from the shadows, sharing their own stories in comment threads. "I worked housekeeping at Hallberg Properties for 6 years. Management treated us like garbage. They discriminated against anyone who wasn't white and wealthy. HR covered it up constantly. Vanessa Hallberg personally got me fired because I wouldn't tolerate her inappropriate comments." The accusations multiplied rapidly as more people found courage in numbers. Near midnight, financial reporter Sarah Kim broke the story on her blog. Reed Capital officially withdraws $100 million investment from Hallberg International. Overnight trading showed Hallberg's stock plummeting as international investors began panicking about the company's stability and leadership. Early Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Richard Hallberg's penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan. The 68-year-old billionaire stood rigid behind his mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. 3 massive television screens mounted on the wall played different news channels, all showing the same humiliating footage on repeat. Vanessa sat slouched in a leather chair, still wearing her wrinkled gala dress from the night before. Dark makeup smeared under her eyes. She looked fragile and small in the vast office filled with awards, photos of Richard with presidents, and displays of corporate achievements spanning 4 decades. "Explain this disaster," Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain why my daughter is on every news channel in America pouring liquor on one of our most important investors." Vanessa's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. "Daddy, I didn't know who he was. He looked like he didn't belong there. The way he dressed, the way he sat there acting all superior." "Superior?" Richard's voice rose slightly. The man was sitting quietly at a bar. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was smug, Vanessa insisted weakly. "You should have seen how he looked at me. Like I was beneath him or something." Richard walked around his desk slowly, each step deliberate and intimidating. "Vanessa, do you understand what you've done? Malcolm Reed isn't just any investor. He controls $100 million of capital that keeps this company operational. Vanessa's face went pale. But we're fine, right? We have other investors. Richard's laugh was bitter and frightening. Fine? Vanessa, we were already bleeding money before last night. The Miami project is 3 months behind schedule. The London acquisition fell through. 2 pension funds pulled out last quarter after regulatory concerns. He stopped directly in front of her chair, towering over his daughter. Malcolm Reed's investment was the only thing preventing a complete financial collapse, and you humiliated him publicly because you didn't like his clothes. Vanessa started crying, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll apologize. I'll fix this. It's too late for apologies, Richard said coldly. The video has 20 million views. Former employees are sharing horror stories online. Our stock price dropped 18% in overnight trading. Across town in Reed Capital's headquarters, Malcolm sat in the conference room studying financial documents spread across the polished table. Jordan Pike paced near the windows, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of concern. The situation is worse than we initially realized, Jordan said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. When markets open Monday morning, Halberg stock will collapse completely. They need emergency funding within 72 hours or face bankruptcy. Malcolm looked up from the documents. Good. Maybe new ownership will treat employees better. Jordan stopped pacing. Malcolm, there's something else. Those offshore transactions you discovered? I've been analyzing the patterns. Someone moved $47 million through shell companies over 18 months. The transfers always happened right before quarterly earnings reports. Fraud, Malcolm said simply. Sophisticated fraud, Jordan confirmed. Someone with high-level access doctored the books to inflate company value. They stole investor money and pension funds, while executives got massive bonuses. Malcolm's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Reed? This is Richard Halberg. I believe we need to speak privately. 2 hours later, Malcolm walked through the marble lobby of the Halberg Grand Hotel toward the executive elevator. The same space where he'd been humiliated now felt different. Staff members glanced at him nervously. Everyone recognized him from the viral video. Richard waited in his private conference room, immaculately dressed in a tailored navy suit. His smile looked practiced and hollow. Malcolm, please sit. Can I offer you coffee? Perhaps some bourbon? Richard's attempt at humor fell flat. I'm fine, Malcolm said, remaining standing. Richard's expression hardened slightly. Let's be direct. Last night was an unfortunate misunderstanding. My daughter acted foolishly, and I sincerely apologize. But we're both businessmen. We can resolve this professionally. Malcolm waited silently. I'm prepared to offer you significant compensation, Richard continued. A formal public apology from Vanessa, a guaranteed board position with Halberg International, plus 20% above your original investment if you publicly restore confidence in the company. No, Malcolm said simply. Richard's polished demeanor cracked. No, Malcolm, be reasonable. This benefits everyone. You make money, we stabilize the company, thousands of employees keep their jobs. Your company is built on fraud, Malcolm said quietly. I found the offshore accounts, the doctored earnings reports, the stolen pension money. Richard went completely still. I don't know what you think you found, but $47 million moved through shell companies, Malcolm interrupted. Always timed before quarterly reports. Someone with executive access has been stealing from investors for over a year. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice cold as winter. Malcolm, you're making a serious mistake. If you try to destroy this company, I will destroy you. I have connections in Washington, New York, and every major financial center. I can make your life very difficult. Malcolm turned toward the door. We're done here. Think carefully, Richard called after him. Men like you don't usually survive wars with men like me. Malcolm walked out without responding. In the hotel parking garage, Malcolm checked his phone and found an anonymous text message waiting. They know you found the records. Be careful. They're already covering their tracks. Malcolm chose a coffee shop 6 blocks from the Hallberg Grand Hotel. The afternoon crowd provided perfect cover for a private conversation. He sat in the back corner, watching the entrance through the window. Elena Torres arrived 15 minutes late, scanning the room nervously before approaching his table. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "If they find out I'm talking to you—" "They won't," Malcolm said calmly. "Tell me what you've seen." Elena glanced around the coffee shop again. 2 teenagers shared earbuds at a nearby table. An elderly man read a newspaper by the window. Nobody paid attention to their conversation. "It's been going on for years," Elena said quietly. "Executives would bring me complaint files and tell me to lose them in the system. Sexual harassment reports, discrimination cases, workplace injuries. They'd make copies disappear from employee records." Malcolm leaned forward. "How many times?" "Dozens. Maybe hundreds." Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Vanessa was the worst. She'd humiliate staff members during busy shifts when customers could see. Waitresses, housekeeping, front desk clerks. She'd scream at them, call them stupid, threaten their jobs. What happened when people complained? Nothing. Richard always protected her." Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages. "Look at this." A housekeeper named Maria Rodriguez complained about Vanessa throwing a wine glass at her head during a private party. The next week, Maria was fired for stealing towels. Malcolm studied Elena's face. She wasn't lying. The fear in her eyes came from witnessing real cruelty. "There was another case," Elena continued. "A server named David Kim threatened to sue after Vanessa physically pushed him in front of guests. He said he had witnesses and security footage. What happened to him?" Elena's expression darkened. "He stopped showing up for work. His apartment was cleared out. His phone was disconnected. Nobody heard from him again." A chill ran down Malcolm's spine. "When was this?" 8 months ago. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. "I copied some payroll records and executive schedules. Not everything, but enough to show patterns." Malcolm pocketed the drive. "Why are you helping me?" "Because somebody needs to stop them." Elena's voice hardened with determination. "I've watched them destroy people's lives for years. I stayed quiet because I needed the job, needed the insurance for my mother's medical bills. But what Vanessa did to you, it was evil. Pure evil." Across town, Vanessa sat in a gleaming conference room with 3 expensive public relations consultants. Charts and graphs covered the walls, showing social media sentiment analysis and news coverage patterns. "We need to flip the narrative immediately," said the lead consultant, a sharp-eyed woman in designer clothes. "The public sees your client as a privileged bully. We make Malcolm Reed the aggressor." "How?" Vanessa demanded. "We frame this as a dangerous investor targeting a woman after misinterpreting a harmless social interaction. He's using his wealth and influence to destroy a family business out of spite." Within hours, carefully crafted statements appeared on news websites and social media platforms. Television commentators began questioning Malcolm's motives during evening broadcasts. "Is this really about corporate governance?" one anchor asked. "Or is this a powerful man seeking revenge against a woman who embarrassed him publicly?" Meanwhile, Jordan Pike worked late in his law office, surrounded by financial documents and computer screens. Shell company records spread across his desk like puzzle pieces. "Meridian Holdings," he muttered. highlighting another suspicious entity. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Received $12 million from Halberg International last quarter. His computer pinged with a new discovery. Another shell company. Then another. Each one traced back to Caribbean accounts, hiding millions of investor dollars. Jordan reached for his phone to call Malcolm when movement outside caught his attention. A black SUV sat across the street, engine running. The windows were too dark to see inside. Malcolm left the coffee shop as evening shadows stretched across downtown Chicago. He walked several blocks toward his hotel, mind racing with Elena's revelations. The corruption ran deeper than financial fraud. This was systematic abuse of power. He turned onto a busy street filled with Saturday evening traffic. Cars moved slowly in both directions. Malcolm noticed a black SUV maintaining the same distance behind him, never getting closer, never falling back. At the next intersection, Malcolm turned right. The SUV turned right. Malcolm crossed the street. The SUV followed. His hotel was still 3 blocks away, and the black SUV continued its slow pursuit through the darkening Chicago streets. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Malcolm's hotel suite on the 32nd floor. The city lights blurred through the water streaming down the glass, creating an abstract painting of Chicago's skyline. Malcolm stood near the window, still wearing the same dark polo from the bar incident, his mind processing the day's revelations. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Malcolm opened the door to find Jordan Pike, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from the storm. Water dripped from his expensive overcoat as he stepped inside, carrying a leather briefcase bulging with documents. "We have a serious problem," Jordan said without preamble, setting his briefcase on the marble dining table. "Richard Halberg has been moving money for weeks." Malcolm closed the door and walked over as Jordan spread financial records across the table. Charts and bank statements covered the polished surface like evidence in a murder case. "Look at this," Jordan pointed to highlighted transactions. Meridian Holdings received $12 million 3 weeks ago. Caribbean Trust got $8 million last Monday. Phoenix International took $15 million on Wednesday. "Before I withdrew my investment," Malcolm observed, studying the dates. "Exactly. He knew this was coming. Someone tipped him off that you were investigating." Jordan's voice carried a dangerous edge. "These transfers weren't panic moves after your withdrawal. They were planned escape routes." Malcolm felt cold understanding settle in his chest. He's been stealing investor money and hiding it offshore. Gets worse. Each shell company traces back to accounts Richard controls personally. He's been draining Halberg International systematically while telling shareholders the company was financially stable. Thunder crashed outside, rattling the windows. Malcolm walked back toward the storm, processing the implications. Richard hadn't just committed fraud. He'd planned to destroy his own company and escape with stolen millions. "There's more," Jordan continued. "I checked the timing of your initial investment. Richard actively recruited your money 6 months ago, specifically targeting Reed Capital. You weren't just an investor. You were the mark." Across the city in a television studio, Vanessa Halberg sat under bright lights, facing a sympathetic female interviewer. Her makeup was perfect, her designer dress carefully chosen to appear elegant, but not flashy. Tears glistened in her eyes as she spoke. "The internet hate has been devastating," Vanessa said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "People are sending death threats to my family. They're calling me horrible names based on a few seconds of video taken completely out of context." The interviewer leaned forward with concern. "What really happened that night?" "I was celebrating with friends after a charity event where we raised money for children's hospitals. This man was sitting alone, acting strangely, making everyone uncomfortable. When I tried to politely ask him to leave our private area, he became aggressive and threatening." Vanessa dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "I was terrified. I threw my drink because I feared for my safety. Social media exploded within minutes. The hashtag Justice for Vanessa began trending alongside Malcolm Truth. Public opinion fractured into angry camps defending both sides. Meanwhile, Elena Torres crept through empty hallways inside the Hallberg Grand Hotel. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she'd hidden in the employee break room until security finished their rounds. Now she moved quietly toward the executive offices on the 20th floor, her employee key card granting access to restricted areas. The hallway was dimly lit, with only emergency lighting casting long shadows. Elena's heart pounded as she approached the Human Resources office. She knew the filing cabinets contained confidential settlement agreements and employee complaints that Hallberg executives thought were safely buried. Elena slipped inside and quickly located the correct filing cabinet. Her hands shook as she opened drawer after drawer, photographing documents with her phone's camera. Discrimination settlements, sexual harassment complaints, retaliation cases. Each file represented someone whose life had been damaged by Hallberg International's culture of abuse. She found a thick folder labeled Executive Immunity Protocols. Inside were legal strategies for protecting Richard and Vanessa from employee lawsuits, including instructions for destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses. Suddenly, Elena heard voices in the hallway. Security guards were conducting an unscheduled search of the office floors, their flashlight beams sweeping through doorways. "Check every room," a gruff voice commanded. Someone's been accessing files they shouldn't have. Elena's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow, they'd discovered her activities. She quickly shoved the documents back into the filing cabinet and looked for an escape route. The voices grew closer. Elena spotted a service door marked Authorized Personnel Only and slipped through it into a narrow maintenance hallway. She could hear security guards entering the office she'd just evacuated. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They know you took the files. Get out now." Elena ran through the service corridors, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. She reached a stairwell and climbed down 15 flights, her lungs burning with exertion and fear. When she finally reached the parking garage, Elena's hands trembled as she called Malcolm. "They almost caught me," she whispered into the phone. "Someone told them I was accessing files. They're searching the entire building. Where are you now?" Malcolm's voice was calm but urgent. "Parking garage. I think I'm safe, but they know I have information. Don't go home tonight. Find somewhere public with cameras and witnesses. I'll meet you tomorrow." "Malcolm, what I found, it's worse than we thought. They have protocols for destroying evidence. They've done this before." In a downtown law office, Richard Hallberg sat across from 3 expensive attorneys. The conference room was filled with cigarette smoke, despite the building's no-smoking policy. Richard's usual polished appearance had cracked, revealing the desperate man underneath. "I want everything on Malcolm Reed," Richard said, his voice cold with fury. "Military records, business dealings, personal relationships, financial irregularities. Find something we can use to destroy him." The lead attorney, a thin man with calculating eyes, nodded. "We'll examine his military discharge, investigate his early investments, interview former business partners. If there's anything questionable in his background, we'll find it." "What about criminal charges?" Richard asked. "Market manipulation is possible. We could argue he deliberately damaged Hallberg International stock for personal gain." Richard smiled for the first time in days. Make it happen. Back in his hotel suite, Malcolm stood at the window watching emergency vehicles navigate the flooded streets below. Jordan had spread even more documents across the table, connecting shell companies to offshore accounts like a conspiracy theorist's wall chart. Malcolm's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from a contact in Washington, D.C. He read the text twice before showing it to Jordan. Federal regulators have begun quietly examining Halberg International finances. Malcolm read aloud. Jordan looked up from the financial records. That was faster than expected. Someone else is investigating them. We're not alone in this. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the dark sky. Malcolm realized they'd crossed a point of no return. Richard Halberg would now fight with everything he had, using every dirty trick and illegal strategy at his disposal. The war was just beginning. Malcolm sat in his corner office at Reed Capital headquarters, watching 3 different news channels on mounted screens. Each one painted him as a villain. Malcolm Reed's sudden withdrawal from Halberg International raises serious questions about market manipulation, said a financial analyst on CNN. Investors who followed his lead lost millions overnight. On Fox Business, another commentator was even harsher. Reed built his fortune by targeting vulnerable companies. His military background suggests someone comfortable with aggressive tactics. The third screen showed MSNBC running a segment titled The Predatory Investor. Malcolm's professional headshot appeared next to stock charts showing Halberg's collapse. His assistant knocked and entered nervously. "Mr. Reed, 3 more partners called this morning. They're concerned about continuing relationships." Malcolm nodded without looking away from the screens. "Schedule individual meetings with anyone who wants to talk." "Yes, sir. Also, Mr. Pike is here with updates." Jordan entered carrying a thick folder and wearing the grim expression Malcolm had learned to recognize. "It's getting worse. Richard Halberg has connections everywhere. Former Defense Department officials, congressional staffers, federal judges. What are they saying about my military service? Anonymous sources claim you received a less than honorable discharge. Complete lies, but the rumors are spreading." Malcolm finally turned from the screens. "And my business records? They're trying to paint your early investments as predatory, targeting minority-owned businesses for hostile takeovers." The irony wasn't lost on Malcolm. He'd spent years helping struggling companies survive, often saving jobs that would have been lost otherwise. Now, those same success stories were being twisted into weapons against him. His phone buzzed with messages from business partners expressing concerns about their association. Malcolm deleted them without responding. "How many investors have pulled out?" he asked. "4 smaller ones. The major partners are holding steady, but they're nervous." Malcolm walked to his window overlooking Chicago's financial district. The streets below bustled with people who had no idea their retirement funds and pension investments were being manipulated by powerful men playing games. "They're not just trying to destroy my business," he said quietly. "They want to make me an example. Show other people what happens when you challenge them." Across town, Vanessa sat in a crisis management firm's sleek conference room. The consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Walsh, had built her career cleaning up celebrity scandals. "You need to disappear from public view completely," Patricia said. "No restaurants, no social events. Definitely no more television interviews." "But people are saying horrible things about me online," Vanessa protested. "They're calling me racist. They're making memes out of that stupid video." "Which is exactly why you stay hidden. Every time you speak publicly, you make it worse." Vanessa's hands shook as she scrolled through social media comments. Thousands of people had shared the bar video, adding their own commentary. Most of it was brutal. "This is Malcolm Reed's fault," she said. "He made me look bad on purpose." Patricia leaned forward. "Miss Halberg, you poured alcohol on a man's head in public. He didn't make you do anything. You don't understand. People like him don't belong in places like that." The consultant stared at her for a long moment. "That attitude is why you're in this mess." Meanwhile, Elena sat on her cousin Maria's couch in a cramped apartment on Chicago's South Side, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens. She'd been organizing files for hours, cross-referencing executive bonuses with legal settlements. The pattern was clear and disgusting. Every time Halberg International paid money to silence discrimination complaints, certain executives received performance bonuses. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. They were rewarded for covering things up, she muttered, highlighting another connection. Maria brought her coffee and glanced at the papers. This looks dangerous, Elena. It is dangerous. But look at this. Elena showed her cousin a spreadsheet. They paid $2 million to silence a woman who reported sexual assault by a department head. 3 months later, 5 executives got bonuses totaling $4 million. They were celebrating? They were being paid to keep quiet. Elena's phone rang. Malcolm's number. "I want to meet you tonight," he said. "I need to thank you personally for what you're doing. It's not safe for you to come here." "I don't care about safe anymore. They're already trying to destroy me. Where are you?" Elena gave him the address reluctantly. 2 hours later, Malcolm knocked on the apartment door. Elena let him in quickly, checking the hallway before closing and locking it. "You look tired," she said. "I haven't slept much." The news coverage is relentless. Elena led him to the living room where her evidence was spread across every surface. Malcolm studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. "This proves they've been buying silence for years," he said, "and rewarding the people who helped them do it." Malcolm looked at Elena with genuine admiration. "You risked everything to get this information. Your job, your mother's insurance, maybe even your safety. Someone had to do it. I watched them hurt people for too long." They spent an hour reviewing the evidence together, building a comprehensive picture of Halberg International's systematic corruption. Elena had documented everything methodically, like the law student she'd once been. "This is enough to bring them down," Malcolm said finally. "If we can get it to the right people." Jordan knows prosecutors who specialize in corporate fraud, people who can't be bought. Elena nodded. "I'll make copies of everything tonight." Malcolm stood to leave. "Elena, after this is over, I want to offer you a position at Reed Capital. Someone with your skills and integrity deserves better than serving drinks to people like Vanessa Halberg." "I'd like that." Malcolm headed for the door. "Be careful. If they discover you have these files—" "I know." Elena locked the door behind him and watched through the peephole as Malcolm walked down the hallway toward the elevator. As Malcolm exited the apartment building onto the quiet street, he noticed a dark sedan parked across the road. 2 men sat in the front seats, and one raised what looked like a camera with a telephoto lens. The flash was subtle, but Malcolm saw it. They were documenting his movements now. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Malcolm sat in Reed Capital's conference room at 5:30 a.m., spread documents across the polished oak table, while Jordan reviewed legal precedents on his laptop. "Markets open in 3 hours," Jordan said without looking up. "Halberg stock is already down 12% in pre-market trading." Malcolm organized financial records into neat stacks. Offshore account statements, shell company registrations, wire transfer confirmations. Each document told part of the same story. Systematic fraud spanning years. "The investigators arrive at 7, Malcolm said. "Everything needs to be perfect." "It is perfect. Richard Halberg is finished." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline emerged from darkness as early commuters filled the streets below. Malcolm had barely slept, but his mind felt sharp and focused. Today would change everything. At exactly 7 o'clock, 2 federal investigators entered the conference room. Special Agent Sarah Mitchell carried a briefcase and legal pad. Her partner, Agent David Torres, activated a digital recorder. "Mr. Reed, we appreciate your cooperation," Agent Mitchell said. "Please walk us through what you discovered." Malcolm began methodically. He explained how routine financial analysis revealed suspicious patterns in Halberg International's quarterly reports. foreign subsidiaries that existed only on paper, consulting fees paid to companies with no employees, investment accounts that moved money in circles. These transactions match classic money laundering schemes, Jordan added, sliding documents across the table. Approximately $43 million disappeared over 18 months. Agent Torres studied the bank records carefully. Who else knew about these accounts? Richard Hallberg personally authorized every transfer, Malcolm said. His digital signature appears on all major transactions. Agent Mitchell made detailed notes. Do you have evidence of witness intimidation or document destruction? Malcolm nodded toward Jordan, who produced Elena's internal memos. The investigators read silently, their expressions growing more serious with each page. These show systematic destruction of employee complaints, Agent Mitchell said finally. That's obstruction of justice. At 9:30 a.m., financial markets opened. Hallberg International stock immediately plunged 28%. Trading volume exploded as investors rushed to sell. News channels broadcast live footage of crowds gathering outside Hallberg headquarters, demanding answers. Malcolm watched the chaos from his office television. Reporters surrounded the building's entrance, while security guards struggled to control the situation. Richard Hallberg had not appeared publicly since Saturday. His phone rang constantly, business partners calling to offer support, journalists requesting interviews, investors seeking reassurance about Reed Capital's stability. The board of directors just called an emergency meeting, Jordan announced, entering Malcolm's office with fresh coffee. They're discussing Richard's removal. How long have they been meeting? 2 hours. Several members flew in from New York this morning. Malcolm felt something he had not experienced since Friday night. Genuine hope. The truth was spreading faster than the Hallbergs could contain it. By afternoon, news outlets began investigating Vanessa's history of abusive behavior. Former hotel employees appeared on television describing years of harassment and intimidation. One woman tearfully explained how Vanessa fired her for refusing unwanted advances from a wealthy guest. She told me I was lucky to have any job at all, the woman said during a live interview. She said people like me should be grateful. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media turned completely against Vanessa. Her charity work was exposed as elaborate tax schemes. Her friends publicly distanced themselves? That evening, Malcolm and Jordan celebrated quietly at Romano's, an upscale steakhouse downtown. The restaurant felt peaceful after days of constant tension. Federal indictments could happen within a week, Jordan said, cutting his ribeye steak. Maybe sooner if they find cooperation from inside witnesses. Elena deserves most of the credit, Malcolm replied. Without her evidence, this would have been much harder to prove. She risked everything. She did the right thing when it mattered most. Malcolm raised his wine glass. To justice finally being served. They clinked glasses and enjoyed their first relaxed dinner in days. At 11:45 p.m., Malcolm's town car pulled up outside his downtown condominium building. He thanked the driver and walked toward the lobby entrance, feeling genuinely optimistic for the first time since the bar incident. Then he saw them. 6 federal agents waited near the building's entrance. 3 black SUVs lined the street with red and blue lights flashing silently. Agent Mitchell approached him directly. Her expression was cold and professional. Malcolm Reed, you are under arrest for securities fraud and insider trading. She held up sealed warrants bearing federal court stamps. The fluorescent lights inside Reed Capital headquarters buzzed harshly overhead as federal agents moved through the offices like wolves hunting prey. Malcolm sat handcuffed in his own conference room, watching strangers dismantle everything he had built over 20 years. Agent Mitchell supervised the search while reading from the warrant. Securities fraud, insider trading, market manipulation. You withdrew your investment knowing it would crash Hallberg stock, then profited from short positions. That's impossible. Malcolm said quietly. "I never shorted anything." "The transaction records say otherwise." Jordan paced frantically outside the conference room glass, shouting into his phone at emergency legal contacts. Through the windows, television crews filmed everything. Camera flashes lit up the building like lightning strikes. Malcolm's employees huddled near their desks, while agents seized computers and files. 23 people worked for Reed Capital. Good people with families and mortgages. Now they watched their jobs disappear in real time. By 1 a.m., news channels exploded with breaking coverage. Disgraced investor Malcolm Reed arrested for securities fraud tonight. Federal prosecutors claim Reed manipulated Halberg stock prices for massive profits. The man who portrayed himself as a victim may actually be the criminal. The narrative flipped completely within hours. Malcolm transformed from whistleblower to villain. Social media erupted with accusations and conspiracy theories. The same people who supported him Friday night now demanded his prosecution. Reed Capital's phones rang constantly. Panicked investors demanding immediate withdrawals. Business partners canceling contracts. Banks freezing credit lines. "This is coordinated," Jordan whispered during a brief moment alone with Malcolm. "The evidence looks manufactured, but proving that will take months." "How bad is the financial damage?" "Catastrophic. We've lost $40 million in withdrawn investments since midnight. More pulling out every hour." Malcolm felt the walls closing around him. The Halbergs had anticipated every move and prepared the perfect trap. While he focused on exposing their corruption, they quietly fabricated evidence, painting him as the real criminal. Across town, Richard Halberg held an emergency press conference outside corporate headquarters. He appeared calm and dignified despite the late hour. "I am deeply saddened to learn about Mr. Reed's alleged criminal activities," Richard said to the cameras. Halberg International cooperated fully with federal investigators. "We will continue supporting law enforcement as they pursue justice." Reporters shouted questions about company corruption, but Richard's lawyers quickly ended the briefing. In her penthouse apartment, Vanessa watched the coverage with savage satisfaction. She poured expensive champagne and called her publicist immediately. "Malcolm Reed is finished," she said, laughing into the phone. "Nobody will believe anything he says now. We destroyed him completely." Meanwhile, Elena unlocked her apartment door and immediately knew something was wrong. Furniture had been moved. Drawers hung open. Her laptop was missing from the kitchen table. She ran to her bedroom closet where she had hidden backup files. The box was gone. Every document, every copied record, every piece of evidence she had gathered. Stolen. Elena grabbed her purse and car keys without unpacking. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew exactly what she possessed and where she kept it. She drove to a 24-hour diner across town and tried calling Malcolm. His phone went straight to voicemail. She tried Jordan. No answer. Elena realized she was completely alone now. The people who might protect her were fighting for their own survival. The evidence that could prove their innocence had vanished. She paid for her coffee in cash and disappeared into the night. By 3 a.m., Reed Capital's emergency board meeting had reached its inevitable conclusion. Board members demanded Malcolm step aside as CEO immediately to prevent total financial collapse. "It's temporary," the chairman explained over speakerphone, "until legal issues get resolved." Malcolm sat alone in his dark office after everyone left. Television anchors declared his career effectively over on multiple news channels. The same screens that showed his triumph 12 hours earlier now displayed his complete destruction. Outside, Chicago slept peacefully, while Malcolm's world burned around him. Tuesday morning, light filtered through the blinds of Jordan Pike's sparse downtown apartment. Malcolm sat hunched over Jordan's kitchen table, staring at federal documents spread across the surface. His clothes were wrinkled from sleeping on the couch. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Look at this timestamp," Jordan said, pointing to a digital file header. He wore reading glasses and had been studying evidence since sunrise. This document shows 11:47 p.m. submission to federal servers. Malcolm leaned closer. "What's wrong with that?" The metadata shows it was actually created at 11:52 p.m., 5 minutes after submission. Jordan's voice carried quiet intensity. Someone altered this evidence after it reached federal investigators. Malcolm's blood chilled. That's impossible unless someone inside the investigation is compromised. Yes. Jordan removed his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. The Hallbergs have deeper connections than we realized. Outside, reporters still camped near Malcolm's house 3 blocks away. News vans lined the street waiting for any glimpse of the disgraced investor. Malcolm had escaped through Jordan's building's parking garage before dawn. How do we prove the timestamps were altered? Carefully. If we're right, accusing federal investigators of corruption could destroy us completely. Jordan gathered the papers into neat stacks. We need independent verification from someone the government can't touch. Malcolm's phone buzzed with another death threat from an anonymous number. He deleted it without reading the full message. Dozens arrived every hour now. Meanwhile, across the city in Richard Hallberg's executive office, Vanessa paced near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Her father sat behind his massive desk arguing harshly with 3 corporate attorneys. The federal investigation needs to focus entirely on Reed's trading violations, Richard demanded. Nothing else matters now. Sir, if they discover our offshore accounts, one lawyer began nervously. They won't. Reed is the perfect distraction. Richard's voice carried cold satisfaction. Let him burn while we clean house quietly. Vanessa stopped pacing. Something in her father's tone disturbed her deeply. Dad, what exactly happened Friday night at the bar? The lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Richard waved them away dismissively. Give us privacy. After they left, Vanessa confronted her father directly. You knew Malcolm was withdrawing his investment before I even saw him at the bar, didn't you? Richard studied his daughter carefully. What makes you think that? Because hotel security told me executives held emergency meetings Friday afternoon, hours before I humiliated him publicly. Richard's expression remained neutral, but Vanessa knew that look. He was calculating how much truth to reveal. We suspected Reed might cause problems, Richard admitted slowly. His withdrawal timing seemed suspicious. You wanted me to provoke him. Vanessa's voice grew horrified as understanding dawned. You knew I would lose control and embarrass him publicly. Vanessa, you manipulated me. She slammed her palm against his desk. You used my worst impulses as part of some corporate strategy. Richard stood and moved toward her. Everything I do protects this family. By turning me into your weapon? Vanessa backed away from him. By letting me destroy my own reputation while you stayed clean? For the first time in her life, Vanessa realized her father had never protected her. He had only used her recklessness when it served his purposes. You're upset, Richard said calmly. Go home and rest. Let me handle. Handle what? More lies? Vanessa grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I won't be your puppet anymore. She stormed out, leaving Richard alone with his schemes. That afternoon, Malcolm's phone rang with an unknown local number. He hesitated before answering. Malcolm? It's Elena. Her voice sounded strained and frightened. Elena, where are you? I've been worried. I can't talk long. Someone inside Hallberg Security tried to silence me permanently after I copied those files. Malcolm gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean, silence you? 2 men broke into my apartment while I was there. I barely escaped through the fire escape. Elena's words came quickly. but I hid backup evidence on an encrypted external server before disappearing. Everything we need to prove their corruption. Where are you now? Safe. But we need to meet tonight. I have information that will destroy them completely. Malcolm looked at Jordan, who was listening intently. Where? The abandoned rail station beneath Millennium Park. 11 p.m. Come alone and watch for surveillance. The line went dead. Jordan frowned. It could be a trap. Malcolm stared at the silent phone. Elena had risked everything to help him. Now she was hiding for her life because of his fight against the Hallbergs. Maybe, but she's the only person who can prove we're telling the truth. Malcolm agreed to meet Elena secretly that night beneath the abandoned rail station outside downtown Chicago. The abandoned rail station beneath Millennium Park felt like a tomb. Heavy trains thundered overhead every few minutes, shaking dust from the cracked concrete ceiling. Malcolm pressed his back against a rusted support beam and checked his watch. 11:15 p.m. Elena was late. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Platform 3. Stay in shadows. Malcolm moved deeper into the darkness, stepping carefully around broken glass and discarded equipment. The air smelled of diesel fumes and decay. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Malcolm! He turned toward the whisper. Elena emerged from behind a concrete pillar, her face pale and exhausted. She wore a dark hoodie and carried a worn backpack. Are you hurt? Malcolm asked. Scared, but alive. Elena glanced nervously toward the tunnel entrance. We don't have much time. Those men are still looking for me. She pulled a small external drive from her backpack. Everything's on here. Financial fraud, offshore accounts, executive bribes. But it's worse than you know. Malcolm took the drive. How much worse? Remember I told you about an employee who disappeared after threatening legal action? Elena's voice trembled. His name was David Martinez, hotel maintenance supervisor. He discovered executives were skimming money from employee pension funds. A train roared overhead, drowning out her words momentarily. What happened to him? Malcolm asked when the noise faded. They destroyed his reputation first, planted drugs in his locker, got him arrested on false charges, fired him publicly. Elena wiped tears from her eyes. David couldn't find work anywhere, lost his apartment, started drinking heavily. Malcolm felt cold dread settling in his stomach. 3 months later, police found David's body in the Chicago River. Suicide, they said. But I found internal emails celebrating his problem being solved permanently. Malcolm stared at her in horror. They drove him to kill himself. Richard personally authorized the frame-up. Vanessa laughed about it in executive meetings. Elena's voice hardened with anger. They murdered him just as surely as if they'd pulled a trigger. The weight of responsibility crashed over Malcolm. This wasn't just about corporate corruption anymore. People had died because of Hallberg greed and cruelty. There's more, Elena continued. Racist communications between executives. They called employees animals, joked about keeping certain types out of customer areas. Richard used racial slurs in recorded board meetings. Before Malcolm could respond, bright headlights swept across the tunnel entrance. Car doors slammed in the distance. They found us, Elena whispered. Malcolm grabbed her arm. Is there another way out? Maintenance tunnels. This way. They ran deeper into the abandoned station as footsteps echoed behind them. Elena led Malcolm through a narrow doorway into a service corridor lined with pipes and electrical cables. There! A voice shouted. Platform 3! Malcolm pulled out his phone and called Jordan. Copy the files now. Elena's server password is David Martinez. Got it, Jordan replied. Stay on the line. They crawled through a low-maintenance tunnel as the footsteps grew louder. Elena's breathing was sharp and panicked. Malcolm tried to stay calm, but his heart pounded like a drum. Light suddenly flooded the tunnel behind them. Heavy boots splashed through puddles. "Stop running!" a man yelled. "We just want to talk." They reached a vertical shaft with a rusty ladder leading upward. Elena climbed first while Malcolm stayed below, watching the tunnel entrance. A security guard rounded the corner, flashlight in one hand and something metallic in the other. "Found you," the man growled. Malcolm recognized him from the hotel. Big, mean-looking, with dead eyes. The guard lunged forward. Malcolm dodged sideways and grabbed a length of broken pipe from the tunnel floor. The guard swung his flashlight like a club. Malcolm blocked with the pipe, metal ringing against metal. The impact sent vibrations through his arms. "You should have minded your own business," the guard snarled. He rushed Malcolm again. This time Malcolm was ready. He stepped aside and brought the pipe down hard across the man's shoulder. The guard stumbled and fell to one knee. Malcolm didn't wait. He scrambled up the ladder as fast as possible, Elena pulling him through the opening at the top. They emerged in an alley behind a closed restaurant. Jordan's voice crackled through Malcolm's phone. "Files are copied. This is unbelievable, Malcolm. This stuff is nuclear." Malcolm looked at Elena, both of them bruised and breathing hard. "Authentic?" he asked Jordan. "Devastating. This destroys them forever." Early Wednesday morning, light filtered through the reinforced windows of Jordan Pike's secured office suite on the 32nd floor of downtown Chicago's legal district. Malcolm sat hunched over a laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's glow as he scrolled through page after page of damning evidence. Elena occupied the leather chair beside him, her hands trembling slightly, as she pointed out specific documents she had risked everything to preserve. Jordan paced behind his mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear. His voice remained calm and professional, despite the explosive nature of what they had uncovered. "Sarah, I need you to look at something that could change everything," Jordan said into the phone. "No, I can't discuss it over the line. Meet me at the usual place in 2 hours." Malcolm looked up from the screen. "Sarah Patterson from the Tribune?" "She's the only investigative journalist in this city who isn't bought and paid for," Jordan replied, ending the call. "If anyone can handle this story properly, it's her." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "What if they come after her too?" "They can try," Jordan said grimly. "But Sarah's been exposing corporate corruption for 20 years. She knows how to protect herself." Malcolm's phone buzzed with another text from his media consultant. The messages had been non-stop since yesterday's insider trading accusations hit the news. His reputation was being shredded in real time across every major network. "I need to make a statement," Malcolm said. "The longer I stay silent, the more people believe their lies." Jordan nodded. "We'll record it here. Clean background, professional lighting. Keep it calm and factual. No emotion, no anger. Even after everything they've done, especially after everything they've done. The moment you lose your composure, you become the angry black man they want to portray. Stay dignified. Let the evidence speak." Elena stood and walked to the window overlooking the Chicago River. "How did I work for these people for so long without seeing the truth?" "You saw it," Malcolm replied gently. "You just didn't have the power to stop it alone." Across town in the penthouse office of Hallberg International, Richard Hallberg threw his coffee mug against the wall. The ceramic shattered, leaving dark stains on the expensive wallpaper. 3 executives sat frozen around his conference table, none daring to speak. "How did the files survive?" Richard's voice was ice-cold fury. "I was told everything was destroyed." "We thought," began one executive. "You thought?" Richard slammed his fist on the table. "Thinking isn't your job. Following orders is your job." The door burst open, and Vanessa stormed in, her designer clothes wrinkled and her makeup smeared. She had been awake all night, replaying everything she had learned about her father's true nature. "Everyone out," she commanded the executives. They scrambled to leave, grateful to escape Richard's wrath. "What do you want, Vanessa?" Richard's tone softened slightly, but his eyes remained hard. "I want to know if it's true." Her voice cracked. "The employee who died, David Martinez, did he really kill himself because of what we did to him?" Richard turned to face the window, his hands clasped behind his back. David Martinez was weak. He couldn't handle the pressure of corporate life. "That's not what I asked." Vanessa stepped closer. "Did our company drive him to suicide?" "The company did what was necessary to protect our interests." "Answer me!" Richard spun around, his face twisted with cold pragmatism. "Yes. We destroyed his career. We made sure no one would hire him. We buried his complaints and discredited his character. He chose his own response to that pressure." Vanessa staggered backward as if struck. "You killed him. I protected this empire. I protected your future. I protected our family name." "Our family name?" Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. "Our name is built on destroying innocent people." Richard's expression didn't change. "Innocent people don't matter, Vanessa. Power matters. Control matters. The weak exist to serve the strong." Vanessa stared at her father as if seeing him for the first time. The man who had raised her, who had protected her from consequences, who had taught her that wealth made her superior. That man was a monster. "I can't be part of this anymore," she whispered. "You don't have a choice." "You're a Hallberg." Back in Jordan's office, Malcolm finished recording his public statement. His voice had remained steady throughout, his message clear and uncompromising. "I categorically deny all accusations of insider trading. I withdrew my investment from Hallberg International after discovering evidence of systematic fraud and corruption. I will cooperate fully with any legitimate investigation. But I will not be intimidated into silence while powerful people escape accountability for their crimes." Elena watched him with growing admiration. "How do you stay so calm?" "Practice," Malcolm replied. 23 years in the military teaches you to control your emotions under pressure." Jordan's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "Sarah Patterson." That was quick. He answered the call. "Already?" "You're sure?" A long pause. "We'll be there." He hung up and looked at Malcolm with grim satisfaction. Social media is turning. Legal analysts are questioning the timeline of the insider trading accusations. Some people are starting to realize you've been framed. Elena took a deep breath. "I want to go public. I want to testify about what I saw." Malcolm shook his head. "Elena, they'll come after you with everything they have. Let them try. David Martinez is dead because I stayed quiet. I won't let anyone else suffer." Jordan's phone buzzed with a news alert. He read it and looked up with a mixture of concern and anticipation. Richard Hallberg just scheduled a live televised interview for tomorrow night. He's going on national television to restore public confidence before markets reopen Friday morning. Thursday evening, inside the crowded Channel 7 news studio, Richard Hallberg adjusted his silk tie and smoothed his silver hair. Camera crews bustled around the brightly lit set, while makeup artists applied final touches to his face. The veteran news anchor, Patricia Caldwell, reviewed her notes one last time. Richard felt confident, controlled. This was his element, commanding a room, shaping narratives, projecting authority. He had spent 40 years building his reputation through carefully orchestrated public appearances. Tonight would be no different. 30 seconds, Mr. Hallberg," a production assistant called out. Richard nodded and straightened his shoulders. He had weathered corporate scandals before. This was simply another crisis to manage through superior strategy and unwavering confidence. In the green room behind the studio, Vanessa paced frantically while watching multiple television screens. Her hands shook as she gripped her phone, watching social media posts attacking both her family and Malcolm Reed. She had barely slept in 2 days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes despite heavy concealer. "This has to work," she whispered to herself. "Daddy will fix everything." But doubt gnawed at her stomach. The conversation with her father yesterday had shattered something fundamental inside her worldview. She kept hearing his cold admission: innocent people don't matter. 20 miles away, in Jordan Pike's secured office suite, Malcolm sat perfectly still while watching the broadcast on a large wall-mounted screen. Elena stood beside him, nervously twisting her hands. Jordan remained at his computer, fingers poised over the keyboard like a pianist preparing for a complex performance. "Remember," Jordan said quietly, "timing is everything. Too early, and they'll cut to commercial. Too late, and he escapes without consequences." Malcolm nodded. His expression remained calm, but Elena could see the tension in his jaw. This moment would determine whether justice prevailed or Richard Hallberg successfully destroyed Malcolm's reputation forever. "Good evening. I'm Patricia Caldwell," the anchor announced to the camera. "Tonight, we're joined by Richard Hallberg, CEO of Hallberg International, to discuss the explosive allegations surrounding his company and investor, Malcolm Reed." Richard smiled warmly at the camera, projecting the polished charm that had made him a media darling for decades. "Patricia, thank you for allowing me to address these vicious lies directly. Hallberg International has served families and travelers worldwide for over 30 years. We employ thousands of hardworking Americans. The idea that we would engage in any improper conduct is absolutely ridiculous." Patricia leaned forward. "Mr. Hallberg, serious accusations have been made about financial irregularities, employee discrimination, and document destruction. How do you respond?" Richard's smile never wavered. "These are desperate fabrications by Malcolm Reed, a disgruntled investor seeking revenge after my daughter rejected his inappropriate advances at our hotel bar. Reed manipulated stock prices, withdrew his investment at precisely the right moment to maximize profit, then orchestrated this smear campaign to cover his tracks." In Jordan's office, Elena gasped. "He's lying about everything!" Malcolm's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained steady. Let him dig his own grave. Back in the studio, Richard continued his performance with practiced ease. "Malcolm Reed is a dangerous man who preys on successful companies and destroys innocent families for personal gain. The federal investigation will prove he committed insider trading while falsely accusing my company of crimes we never committed." Patricia nodded sympathetically. "These must be difficult times for your family." "Absolutely devastating. My daughter Vanessa has received death threats from Reed's supporters. She's a young woman who made a minor social mistake, and now she's being crucified by internet vigilantes following Reed's narrative." In the green room, Vanessa stared at the screen in horror. Her father was portraying her as a helpless victim while simultaneously setting her up as the primary scapegoat. She suddenly understood his strategy. If everything collapsed, he would claim Vanessa acted independently while he remained innocent. Jordan's fingers flew across his keyboard. Patricia's producer just received the first document package, financial records showing offshore transfers. On screen, Patricia touched her earpiece and frowned slightly. "Mr. Hallberg, I'm told we've just received documents that appear to contradict your statements. Our research team is reviewing them now." Richard's smile flickered for just a moment. "I'm sure whatever Malcolm Reed fabricated will be easily debunked by legitimate authorities." Patricia's expression grew more serious as she read information being fed to her through her earpiece. "These documents appear to show significant financial transfers to Caribbean shell corporations registered under names connected to Hallberg International executives. Can you explain these transactions?" Richard's confident demeanor began cracking slightly. Without seeing the specific documents, I can't comment on out-of-context financial materials that may have been altered. Jordan sent another wave of files. Employee settlement records, destroyed complaint files, internal emails showing systematic discrimination. Patricia's eyes widened as she scanned her tablet. Mr. Hallberg, we're now seeing what appears to be internal company communications discussing the destruction of employee complaint records and the payment of illegal settlements to silence discrimination victims. One email appears to have your signature authorizing payment to prevent a lawsuit from going public. The color drained from Richard's face. This wasn't supposed to happen. His media contacts had promised him a friendly interview focused on attacking Malcolm Reed. Those are clearly fabricated, he stammered. Malcolm Reed has sophisticated resources to create false documentation. But Patricia pressed forward relentlessly. We're also seeing evidence that the insider trading accusations against Malcolm Reed were fabricated using altered timestamps and forged financial records. Mr. Hallberg, did your company manufacture evidence against Malcolm Reed to distract from your own legal problems? Richard stood up abruptly, his composure completely shattered. This interview is over. You're ambushing me with fraudulent materials. In Jordan's office, Malcolm allowed himself a small smile. He's finished. The studio erupted in chaos as Richard tried to remove his microphone while Patricia continued reading devastating revelations live on air. Behind the cameras, Vanessa watched her father's empire collapse in real time. Her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Federal agents enter Hallberg International Headquarters during live TV interview. Richard pushed past camera operators and security personnel, desperately seeking the private exit he had used countless times before. But when he reached the steel door leading to the executive parking garage, two federal agents in dark suits stood waiting. Richard Hallberg, you're under arrest for securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Outside Hallberg International Headquarters, the streets had transformed into complete chaos. Police barriers struggled to contain the crowd of protesters, reporters, and curious onlookers who had descended upon the gleaming corporate tower. Camera crews from every major network positioned themselves strategically around the building's perimeter, their bright lights illuminating the night sky like a twisted carnival. Federal agents moved in organized waves through the revolving glass doors, carrying sealed boxes and computer equipment seized from executive offices. Their methodical efficiency stood in stark contrast to the panic spreading through the building's upper floors. Inside the boardroom on the 42nd floor, Hallberg International's remaining executives scrambled to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. Board member Patricia Winwood frantically typed her resignation letter while simultaneously fielding calls from angry shareholders demanding explanations. I had no knowledge of any financial irregularities, she insisted into her phone, sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. The board was completely unaware of Mr. Hallberg's offshore activities. Across the mahogany conference table, Chief Financial Officer David Morse shredded documents, while his assistant uploaded files to external drives. His hands shook as investigators' footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "Sir, they're coming this way," his assistant whispered urgently. 3 more board members submitted formal resignations within the hour, each claiming complete ignorance of the criminal activities now being exposed across every news channel in America. Down on the street, Vanessa sat frozen in the back seat of a black SUV, watching reporters aggressively surround the building she had grown up visiting with pride. The Hallberg name that once commanded respect and admiration had become a symbol of corporate corruption and racial arrogance. A reporter spotted her through the tinted window and began shouting questions while banging on the glass. "Miss Hallberg, can you comment on the viral video of you pouring bourbon on Malcolm Reed?" Did you know about your father's criminal activities? Vanessa's driver quickly pulled away from the curb, but more reporters gave chase on foot, their camera lights creating a strobing effect through the windows. 2 blocks away, Malcolm emerged from a black sedan with Jordan Pike at his side. They walked calmly through the crowd toward the federal building, where prosecutors waited to receive formal evidence. Malcolm carried a leather briefcase containing financial documents and communications that would seal Richard Hallberg's fate permanently. "Mr. Reed," a reporter thrust a microphone toward his face. "How does it feel to bring down one of Chicago's most powerful families?" Malcolm paused briefly, his expression calm and measured. "This isn't about bringing anyone down. It's about holding people accountable for their actions." Inside the federal building, Elena Torres sat across from federal prosecutor Janet Morrison, officially documenting years of misconduct she had witnessed inside Hallberg Properties. Her voice remained steady, despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Richard Hallberg personally ordered the destruction of employee complaint files, Elena stated clearly for the court recorder. "I saw executives alter payroll records to hide illegal settlements. Vanessa Hallberg routinely humiliated staff members, and her father always protected her from consequences." Morrison nodded grimly, adding Elena's testimony to the mountain of evidence already collected. "How many employees would you estimate suffered retaliation for filing complaints?" "Dozens," Elena replied without hesitation. "Maybe more. People were afraid to speak up because they knew the company would destroy their careers." Meanwhile, news outlets across the country began revealing stories from former Hallberg employees nationwide. CNN interviewed a housekeeper from Miami who described racist treatment by executives. Fox News spoke with a chef from Las Vegas who was fired after reporting wage theft. MSNBC featured a former manager from New York who faced death threats after questioning discriminatory hiring practices. The overwhelming public outrage created a cascading effect as more victims found courage to speak publicly about their experiences with Hallberg International's toxic corporate culture. Near midnight, as Malcolm exited the courthouse after providing his statement, Vanessa appeared alone near the entrance steps. She had dismissed her security detail and walked through the hostile crowd to reach him. "Malcolm," she called softly. He turned slowly, Jordan positioning himself protectively nearby. For the first time since their confrontation at the Iron Lantern Bar, Vanessa's voice carried genuine remorse instead of arrogance. "I need to apologize. What I did to you was cruel and wrong. I humiliated you because I thought I could get away with it." "I'm sorry." Malcolm studied her carefully. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared from crying, her entitled confidence completely shattered. "I accept your apology," he replied without warmth. "But you need to understand something, Vanessa. Your cruelty that night exposed corruption that hurt countless people long before you poured bourbon on my head. This was never just about you humiliating me." Vanessa nodded, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her family's crimes finally hit her. As dawn approached Friday morning, she stood alone outside the corporate headquarters, watching maintenance workers remove the massive Hallberg Company sign from the building's facade. Friday afternoon, inside the federal courthouse, reporters packed every available hallway, their cameras and microphones creating a chaotic maze as they awaited the latest developments in what news anchors were calling the Hallberg scandal of the century. Inside courtroom 7B, federal prosecutor Janet Morrison stood before Judge Patricia Reynolds, presenting charges that would destroy one of America's most prominent hotel empires forever. "Your Honor, the United States charges Richard James Hallberg with 17 counts of securities fraud, 12 counts of obstruction of justice, and 9 counts of conspiracy to defraud investors," Morrison announced with quiet authority. Additionally, we're charging executives Thomas Brennan, Michael Santos, and Patricia Wells with related conspiracy and obstruction charges. Richard sat at the defendant's table, his once commanding presence reduced to a hollow shell. The billionaire who had terrorized employees and manipulated markets for decades now faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in federal prison. Judge Reynolds reviewed the charges methodically. Mr. Halberg, you understand these charges carry potential sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years in federal custody? Yes, Your Honor, Richard replied, his voice barely audible. Morrison continued addressing the packed courtroom. We're also announcing that the Department of Justice will pursue additional civil lawsuits involving systematic discrimination, retaliation against whistleblowers, and violations of labor protection laws spanning the past 15 years. The gallery erupted in whispers as former employees realized they might finally receive justice for years of abuse and intimidation. Across town, at the Reed Capital headquarters, Malcolm received the phone call he had been anticipating for days. His attorney, Jordan Pike, delivered the news with obvious relief. It's official, Jordan announced, entering Malcolm's office with a broad smile. Federal forensic analysts confirmed the insider trading evidence was fabricated. All charges against you are being dismissed immediately. The fabrication was so obvious that prosecutors are considering additional obstruction charges against whoever planted it. Malcolm exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't fully realized he was carrying. What about our investors? They're already returning, Jordan replied, consulting his tablet. Confidence in Reed Capital is being restored rapidly. Several major funds have contacted us about increasing their positions once this settles completely. Meanwhile, in her penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, Vanessa Halberg sat surrounded by packed suitcases, her phone buzzing constantly with calls from reporters and former friends she refused to answer. The social isolation had become unbearable. Women who had eagerly sought her friendship at charity galas now crossed streets to avoid speaking with her. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving entirely. Her personal assistant knocked softly on the bedroom door. Miss Halberg, the car is ready to take you to the airport. Vanessa nodded silently. She had decided to leave Chicago indefinitely, hoping distance might eventually allow her to rebuild some semblance of a normal life, away from the scandal that would forever define her family name. At the federal building, Elena Torres emerged from the courthouse steps to face a crowd of journalists eager to interview the whistleblower who had risked everything to expose corruption. Ms. Torres, how does it feel knowing your courage helped bring down one of the country's most powerful corporations? Asked a CNN reporter. Elena paused thoughtfully before responding. I'm not celebrating anyone's downfall. I'm relieved that workers won't have to fear retaliation for speaking up about abuse anymore. That's what matters most. Her words resonated across social media as viewers praised her integrity and selflessness in the face of personal danger. Later that afternoon, Malcolm received an urgent request for a private meeting from representatives of the Halberg International Employees Union. The group included housekeepers, chefs, maintenance workers, and administrative staff who feared the company's collapse would cost thousands of people their jobs and pensions. Union President Maria Gonzalez spoke for the worried employees gathered in Reed Capital's conference room. Mr. Reed, we understand you had every right to withdraw your investment. But now, our members are terrified about losing everything they worked for their entire careers. Malcolm listened intently as workers described their fears about mortgage payments, medical bills, and children's college tuition that depended on their Halberg paychecks. Rather than celebrating his vindication or savoring revenge against the family that had tried to destroy him, Malcolm surprised everyone by proposing an alternative solution. What if we restructured the company under completely new leadership, he suggested. Ethical oversight, transparent financial practices, and most importantly, genuine worker protections and pension security. The room fell silent as employees processed this unexpected offer of salvation instead of abandonment. Jordan watched his longtime friend with quiet admiration, recognizing Malcolm's refusal to become bitter despite everything he had endured during the brutal public attacks on his character and reputation. That evening, Malcolm signed preliminary agreements to help rebuild the former Halberg Empire with transparent oversight and comprehensive worker protections that would prevent future abuse from ever occurring again. 3 months later, the autumn air carried a crisp coolness through downtown Chicago as Malcolm Reed stepped through the familiar glass doors of the Iron Lantern Bar. The space looked identical to that fateful Friday evening when his life had changed forever, yet everything felt completely different. The mahogany bar gleamed under warm lighting. Crystal glasses caught reflections from overhead fixtures. Conversations hummed with the same energy as before. But the atmosphere itself had been transformed entirely. New management had swept through every level of the former Halberg Empire with methodical precision. Strict ethics policies governed employee interactions. Comprehensive anti-discrimination training became mandatory for all staff members. Anonymous reporting systems allowed workers to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Most importantly, a zero-tolerance policy for executive abuse meant powerful people could no longer humiliate others with impunity. Elena Torres moved gracefully behind the bar, her movements confident and purposeful. She wore a crisp white shirt and dark blazer that reflected her new position as corporate ethics director. Though she spent most days in boardrooms and legal meetings now, she still returned to the bar occasionally because she genuinely loved the atmosphere and connecting with people. "Good evening, Mr. Reed," called James, the head bartender who had witnessed Malcolm's humiliation months earlier. "Your usual spot is available." Malcolm nodded appreciatively as he settled onto the same bar stool where Vanessa Halberg had poured bourbon over his head. The irony wasn't lost on him. Other employees acknowledged him respectfully as he passed. Not with the desperate fawning he had seen directed toward wealthy patrons before, but with genuine appreciation for someone who had protected their jobs and dignity when he could have simply walked away after his vindication. The renovation process had been extensive, but worth every effort. Malcolm's investment group had partnered with worker representatives to create comprehensive pension protections, health care improvements, and profit-sharing programs that ensured employees would benefit from the company's success, rather than merely serving wealthy guests who looked down on them. Above the bar, television screens displayed news coverage with closed captions scrolling silently across the bottom. Malcolm caught glimpses of familiar headlines that had dominated financial media for weeks. "Former Halberg CEO accepts plea deal in fraud case," read one banner. The report mentioned Richard Halberg would serve 8 years in federal prison after admitting to conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud totaling over $200 million. Another segment covered the ongoing civil lawsuits filed by former employees who had suffered discrimination and retaliation under the previous management structure. Many of those cases were being settled quietly, with substantial compensation for the victims. A brief mention appeared regarding Vanessa Halberg, who had disappeared from public life entirely after providing damaging testimony against several executives in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Sources indicated she had relocated to Europe and avoided all media contact since the scandal broke. Elena approached Malcolm's section of the bar, carrying a bottle of premium bourbon he recognized immediately. It was the same brand Vanessa had poured over his head during that explosive confrontation. "On the house," Elena said with a warm smile as she poured the amber liquid into a heavy crystal glass. "I figured you might appreciate the symbolism." Malcolm chuckled softly. "I appreciate the gesture more than the symbolism. Though I admit there's some satisfaction in drinking it instead of wearing it." The whole place feels different now, Elena observed, glancing around the crowded room. People seem more relaxed, more genuine, less like they're performing for each other. Malcolm understood exactly what she meant. The aggressive social hierarchies and cruel power dynamics that had poisoned the atmosphere before had been systematically dismantled. Guests still dressed elegantly and conducted business deals, but the toxic culture of humiliation and intimidation was gone. "How are the scholarship programs progressing?" Elena asked while polishing glasses. "Beyond expectations," Malcolm replied. "We're funding college educations for over 300 children of hospitality workers this year. Many of them will be the first in their families to attend university." Elena's smile widened. Those programs had been Malcolm's personal initiative, funded directly through profits from the company restructuring rather than as tax-deductible charity gestures designed primarily for public relations benefits. Malcolm raised his glass slightly and looked around the crowded bar that had once witnessed his public humiliation. Now it represented something entirely different. Proof that dignity could triumph over cruelty, that justice could defeat corruption, and that refusing to be broken by powerful bullies sometimes changed everything. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.